Have you ever looked at a city and wondered how it can completely reinvent itself? Well, today we're diving into Hong Kong's incredible 50-year transformation from a city packed with factories into a super modern future tech hub. And this isn't just about shiny new buildings. Oh no, it's about how the entire way people live and work got flipped on its head. So let's get into it. Okay, just look at this. On the left, that's Kwun Tong back in 1967. All factories and hustle. Now glance over to the right. A slick, modern sign for the Kwun Tong business area. Seriously, it feels like two completely different planets. So how on earth does a city's industrial heart get a total transplant like this?
To answer that, we gotta jump in a time machine and go way back. So let's start with part one, the people power era. This was a time when factories weren't just buildings on the other side of town, they were literally your neighbors. Right, so before the mid-70s, Hong Kong's whole economy was running on pure people power. We're talking about industries like making textiles, plastic flowers, flashlights, things that needed hands, lots and lots of hands. Places like Kwun Tong and San Po Kong were just crammed with these huge factory buildings, and they needed massive teams to keep them going. This whole setup created what geographers call a mutually attractive relationship. Now, I know it sounds a little academic, but it's actually super simple. It's basically a win-win situation where two different things, in this case, factories and workers' homes, get a huge benefit from being right next to each other. So what made it such a perfect match? Well, think about it. For the factories, it was amazing. They had this huge supply of workers living right on their doorstep. And for the workers, it meant jobs were just a short walk away, no need to spend time or money on a long commute. This simple setup is what fueled Hong Kong's massive manufacturing boom. And this picture of Chau Kuo Ling, this is exactly where that workforce lived. These were the typical homes for working families, all packed in together, right next door to the industrial zones. For these families, living close to the factory wasn't just a nice to have, it was absolutely essential for survival. But then, things began to change. The whole system started to crack. So let's move into part two and see how this super close relationship got completely broken apart by something we'll call the Great Industrial Divide. So from the mid-70s up to the 90s, Hong Kong's industries shifted gears. It wasn't about people power anymore. Now it was all about machine power. These are what we call capital-intensive industries. They used giant, expensive equipment, needed way fewer workers, and took up a ton more space. So they popped up in brand new, planned-out areas like the InnoParks in Tai Po and Yuen Long. I mean, just look at the scale of this place. This is the town gas plant in Tai Po. It is enormous. And with this kind of heavy industry comes noise, maybe some pollution, and other potential hazards. Let's be real, you would definitely not want to live next door to this. And this created a totally new dynamic, a mutually opposed relationship. It's the exact opposite of what we saw before. All of a sudden, heavy industry and people's homes were like enemies. Putting them close together was just a recipe for disaster. So what do? Well, the city planners came up with a pretty clever solution. Just separate them. They started building these dedicated industrial estates far away from where people lived, out in the new towns. And to keep the peace, they put buffer zones in between, things like parks and green spaces, to keep them in their own corners. Okay, let's fast forward to today. This brings us to part three, the brain power era, where the relationship between work and home gets a seriously high-tech, high-end makeover. Since the late 90s, Hong Kong has switched things up again. This time, it's all about high-technology industries. We're talking about work that's based on knowledge and ideas, happening in places like Science Park and Cyberport. These industries don't need huge teams of manual laborers. They need highly educated professionals. And these new workplaces look nothing like those old factories. I mean, look at this. This is Science Park. It's clean, it's green. It honestly feels more like a university campus. There are no smokestacks here, just a really cool place to work. And of course, this new type of industry attracts a whole new type of workforce. We're talking about well-paid professionals who want a great quality of life, they want a fantastic living environment, and you know what? They can afford it. This sets the stage for a new 21st century version of that mutually attractive relationship. So what happens next? Well, these high-tech hubs start attracting some seriously high-end housing. This right here is Mayfair by the Sea, a luxury apartment complex right near Science Park. The new brainpower industries and these fancy new homes are once again becoming neighbors, but in a way that is a world away from those old factory districts.
So let's do a super quick recap of this whole journey. We went from the people power of the 70s to the machine power of the 80s and 90s, and now we're in the brain power era of today. Each one of these shifts didn't just change the economy, it physically reshaped the entire city. But all of this progress leaves us with one huge question. And that brings us to our final section, Part 4, the factory's fate. What in the world do we do with all those old factory buildings that the first era left behind? And there's a real debate about this. On one side, you've got people saying we should keep them. They argue it preserves our history, our collective memory. You can turn them into cool art workshops or spaces for new businesses, which saves money compared to rebuilding. But then there's the other side. In a city where land is unbelievably precious, they say demolish them. Free up that scarce land for new housing or shops, which makes more money and gets rid of old, potentially unsafe buildings. There's really no easy answer here.
So, the big takeaway from all this is that a city's map really tells the story of its economy. From those crowded, noisy factory floors to the quiet, green tech campuses of today, how a city works totally defines how its people live. And that leaves us with one last question to think about. Hong Kong's story isn't over. Its economy is going to keep changing, and so will the city itself. It makes you think, no matter where you live, what kind of city do you want to build for the future?